Hi, and welcome to another episode of About the Authors TV. I'm your host, Jake Brown. 10 years ago, Time magazine importantly spotlighted the fact that very few writers are creating complex, evil female characters with interesting motivations. Gillian Flynn is, as the world awaits with bated breath for the big screen adaptation of Gone Girl. When the blockbuster film directed by David Fincher and co-starring Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike hit theaters and grossed $370 million around the world, moviegoers saw that not just the film was based on her New York Times bestseller of the same name, but Flynn's own as screenwriter, reflecting just how fully she was in control of a creative destiny that every other author dreams of seeing manifest into such full bloom. Time magazine would note with equal distinction in the wake of the film's release, ultimately Flynn and director David Fincher created a female role more complex than the woman usually seen in blockbuster films. Gone Girl became a literary and pop culture touchstone for the 2010s, with the bestseller that The Atlantic importantly noting at the time that it catapulted Flynn into literary fame, opening the door in the process for a generation of new female authors, courtesy of what Rolling Stone magazine enthusiastically noted was among her signature standouts as a storyteller, that Flynn famously instills that ferocity into each of her female leads. From the scheming, brilliant Amy Elliott Dunn of her breakout novel Gone Girl, to the ice-vein heist squad of the 2018 Steve McQueen film Widows, to Jessica Hyde, the nearly feral protagonist of Utopia, an Amazon Prime series based on Dennis Kelly's original British show. The show is Flynn's latest foray into TV since co-writing HBO's gothic mystery series Sharp Objects, which was based on her 2006 debut novel. Dark Places, her next bestseller, would be hailed by the New York Times as a nerve-fraying thriller that Entertainment Weekly praised as a propulsive and twisty mystery, while Stephen King affirmed for anyone who hadn't read her groundbreaking work yet that Gillian Flynn is the real deal, a sharp, acerbic, and compelling storyteller with a knack for the macabre. Recently, the Wall Street Journal reported that Flynn has been adding hyphens to her job description, and in addition to her work in TV and film, in 2022, The Hollywood Reporter broke the news that her first publishing acquisition is heading to the small screen. Stone Village Television is set to adapt Margaret Duay's forthcoming novel, Scorched Grace, into a premium television series. The novel will be published next February by independent publisher Zando under Flynn's Gillian Flynn Books imprint. The publisher, founded with Molly Stern in 2020, partners with influential creators, organizations, and institutions to publish a curated slate of titles under their own imprints. Other adaptations in development at Stone Village include The Maidens, based on the novel by Alex Michaelides to be released with Miramax Television, The Last Day, based on the novel by Andrew Hunter Murray, picked up by Paramount Television, and an adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in partnership with Black Box Media. She takes out time today from her multimedia empire to talk about it all. Gillian, we are so excited to have you. Thank you for being on the show. First, congratulations on the 10-year anniversary of a literary touchstone for a whole generation of authors. Long before this iconic book spent 130 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, including 37 weeks at #1, and sold 15 million copies in 46 countries around the world. When the genius premise was first beginning to brew in your imagination, was it one of those that was just too irresistible not to write? One day a wife would wake up and vanish, more or less staging a setup that blamed her husband and cast him under the cloud of suspicion that followed, say in the vein of a monster like Scott Peterson.
The idea of that media climate certainly occurred to me, and I can't say it was the reason, it wasn't the seed of the book, but there's certainly a whole portion of the book that says, when you're a man whose wife is gone, there is no possible way you can react that does not look suspicious. If you're not weeping, you don't care. If you're weeping too much, you're putting on a performance. And, I had noticed that I'm a huge true crime consumer for good and for bad. I don't like the idea of sort of turning someone's complete tragedy into something that I'm consuming as a form of entertainment. It's called Feed the Beast, in journalism. It's called give me more and give me more. And if people are, to use the Scott Peterson case, for instance, that the timing of that was exactly right societally. There obviously needed to be a villain. And I think, it became more and more fed upon itself too by the time that the verdicts were coming in or the trial was going on. People were screaming to his mother, like, I hope they fry your son. I mean, that is a frightening phenomenon. And it's not worthy. It's not a worthy way to relate to humans. I mean, especially someone's mom. It doesn't matter, I just thought there was an incredible cruelty and rush to judgment, and the media playing in on that. But if you're liking something, and I mean that was years ago now, and it's only gotten worse. There's clickbait, now there's the internet, there's social media, now everyone has a camera. So I can't even imagine trying to function. And her family had just such grace and dignity that
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do it. I would crumble. So I try to be careful what I consume, but I'm certainly incredibly aware of that environment of, the 24/7 media and what it will do to someone. So I started with the idea literally of a man comes home to his house and the door is wide open. And like, what does he do next? And having been in the media myself, I know the mindset on both sides. So that's where I really started.
Critics were jumping all over each other to analyze and dissect this new subgenre psychological thriller that you'd invented, and the New York Times was one prominent voice to first recognize and pay praise to the ice-pick sharp, spectacularly sneaky, impressively cagey, and dazzling breakthrough. It's a wily, mercurial, and subtly layered and populated by characters so well imagined that they're hard to part with, even if, as in Amy's case, they're already departed. Talking about Amy and Nick Dunn as they first arrived to you, did they do so as a couple? And specific to Amy's character development, did you see right away what she looked like, hear her talk in a particular voice, say for instance as she wrote in her diary? And how early on did you decide to write the book with alternating narratives between Amy and Nick?
Nick was always Nick from the very beginning. I knew who he was, which was basically me. I mean, he was a guy from Missouri who went to New York to work in the magazines and thought that was really cool, and then got laid off and had a huge crisis of who am I and what am I going to do, and what's going to happen next. And so I had him down pretty cold. I remember originally I was writing the whole thing from Nick's point of view. So throughout the whole thing, the media, I think I was planning that there might be a trial eventually, and you would only find out what happened at the very end. Kaboom, and we're out. And I realized about halfway through, who was this woman? Like, I wanted more from her than a chapter at the end in her voice. Like, she was growing in my head. I mean, she was really coming to life of this baffling idea of who would do this to someone, and how do you make it feel realistic? And so then I had got the idea for the diary, of Amy's point of view through the diary, and that scared the pants off me. The idea of doing that, because I thought if I commit to a diary thing and it does not work, the whole book doesn't work. If people aren't believing that this is Amy, nothing else is gonna happen. And so I began writing that, and it's strange to have a whodunit where you find out whodunit in the middle of the book. and I was sort of faced with this, the chapters are, I think, boy meets girl, boy loses girl, girl gets boy, or something like that, to show the different evolution of where they're at, and play with that sort of romantic comedy vibe. She kind of invaded my space, as well she should.
Now, Amy is no ordinary girl, as readers learn early in the book, courtesy of her childhood relationship with her psychologist parents, and how the book they wrote about her, Amazing Amy, helped shape the rest of her life by the time readers meet her. Please give us a look at how one affected the other while you were writing.
Amy, I played with so much, and we just released a 10-year anniversary edition, and I was like, let's not just re-release it, let's show all my mistakes, because everyone wants to see how you work. And I always tell people I work by writing and rewriting and just figuring it out. Like, I can write my notes all I want, but I'm going to go off track, as one should, I think. If you hit every formula point, you're a formulaic writer. So I like to figure it out. So the original Amazing Amy was the product of two parents one was a feminist sociologist, and one was a group think new age guy who got married and decided to combine forces and create the ultimate bespoke dating service. And Amy worked for that, and that started colliding with it. I wrote tons of that, and it felt way too on the nose. And so I just got rid of that. But I was definitely figuring out her voice while I was doing that. I knew she had to be really sharp, funny enough that people wouldn't immediately be, repelled by her. I wanted her to be someone who was not remotely self-aware, because she would have had a moment where she said, "What the fuck am I doing?" but still funny, so you can sort of see why the two of them originally came together.
Time magazine painted in their review a portrait of a marriage so hilariously terrifying, it'll make you have a good hard think about who the person on the other side of the bed really is, while the Wall Street Journal reassured fans that, as in her other books, Miss Flynn has much more up her sleeve than a simple missing person case. As Nick and Amy alternately tell their stories, marriages never look so menacing, narrators so unreliable. In that context, the unreliable narrator was a genius trick to use in the course of this story's deceptive telling. Was that conscious as a tool, or something that just played out as you were writing? And when you got to part 2 and began peeling away the credibility of both narrators, so to speak, how important were the revelations that emerged about both lead characters for the readers to understand where the story was heading?
A cat and mouse game told by two narrators who aren't reliable or particularly likable, which, believe me, my publisher pointed out in a very kind way. Like, just so you know, you've written a whodunit where you tell whodunit smack in the middle, and you've got narrators that I don't think anyone's going to entirely root for. But then it really turned out people did root for them. They really did come down on Team Nick or Team Amy, and they were very happy to tell me all about it at any book event I did.
People magazine, upon first read of Gone Girl, would declare it an irresistible summer thriller with a twisting plot worthy of Alfred Hitchcock, while the Associated Press hailed this as your most intricately plotted and deliciously sinister story. Dangerous for any reader who prefers to savor a novel as opposed to consuming it in one sitting. And given it's written over parts 1, 2, and 3, we'd love to get a peek, if you'd be willing, at your outlining process. Are you more old school with, say, note cards, or does it all happen in your mind while you're writing?
At the time, I was working in a basement office of our house you went through this creepy unfinished basement to get to this tiny little room that was absolutely freezing in winter, because it was basically planks on dirt. So I had a space heater right at me, and I had all my notes just fluttering on the walls, just everywhere, like questions, literally like things like, I remember I got very amazing Amy in my details. So it was like I had made a joke in the book about how when they started the bar, Nick and Go found a whole bunch of old Zima. And I was like, well, I have a note like, what year was Zima produced? Would this work with the timeline? The timeline has to be right.
For fans, we would love to hear a little bit about how you pre-planned Amy's disappearance in advance of when her character would. For instance, did you along those lines plot out or have any idea in mind of where she'd go once she'd left? And did you personally travel to some of these Ozark backwood getaways for research?
I knew immediately someone like that had to be incredibly righteous, always sure her judgment was the correct one. But also incredibly precise in her vengeance, and smart enough to think of every little step along the way. I mean, I had an Amy journal. I wanted to almost print it like with extra things she had thought about, like footnote 22. By the way, you cannot date ballpoint ink past 1984. Like, I researched this, that luckily I did not put in the book. She ends up going to the Ozarks because I went on a writing retreat with my best friend to the Ozarks, and he was reading, and he was like, oh, like, I remember doing that. Like, it was just, it was all there for me, and I couldn't, and so then I was like, okay, we've got grifters in the Ozarks, maybe does Desi come back in? Because I'm fascinated by this Desi thing, and that could be,
Now, there is quite a motley crew that join Nick and Amy on the wild ride that follows after she disappears. From Nick's twin sister Margot, aka Go, to Amy's best friend Nicole Hawthorne, detectives Rhonda Boney and Jim Gilpin, Nick's attorney Tanner Bolt and his wife Betsy Bolt, or creepy ex-boyfriend Desi Collins. All memorably portrayed in the film. Back when you were first coloring them into being in your imagination, who shined most brightly for you creatively?
I had so many scenes of Desi's house that he takes her to, where like he'd created a fairy tale castle for her. One thing involved a salt cellar with all the world's salts that he had gotten for her because of a fairy tale she had told him. I mean, you just go in and then you have to kind of scrape back the totally insane stuff and keep the mildly insane stuff.
Oprah.com within a feature on books that defined a generation spotlighted within Gone Girl the addictive fact that even while you know you're being manipulated, searching for the missing pieces is half the thrill of this wickedly absorbing tale. And when you first reach the big reveal that hits in the middle of the story long before readers did, And then Amy's plan backfires and is turned on her heading into the final act of the book in part 3. Did you find yourself playing around with any alternate endings versus, say, the way they wind up in the book and then the film?
I got to the reveal where Nick learns, where we all learn the truth of what's happening. And I had no idea what I was going to do with her. Yeah, I got to the end and I tried different endings. I really did, because I know a lot of people hate the ending. I mean, they will come up to me at book events and slam the book down and get like, I hated the ending. And which is great by me, because I'm always like, oh, great, tell me why. Because I would so much rather people have thought about a book and have opinions on my book, no matter what it is, than read a book and go like, I liked it, and never think about it again. So, I have that. And I always say like, okay, what did you not like about it? And it's always some version of, I wanted justice. And I'm always like, whatever led you while you were reading this book to believe there was going to be justice. It's not a justice-y book. I didn't write the ending in the book was the ending in the movie, and we always knew that was going to be the case. David Fincher and I both liked it that way. And if you know his movies, you know that there's not usually the happy. it's not a big happy ending guy, thank goodness. But I did play it with different. So I played with one where the Ozark grifters come back and resurface because they've seen footage of Amy, and they come back to blackmail her, and maybe she kills them or something. I didn't get very far into too many of the other endings because I just knew I didn't want Amy ending up in prison. And I liked that idea that Nick talks about at the end, that the two of them are storytellers and their stories don't work without the other, that she is the ultimate foil for him and vice versa, and they are somehow in a horrific and disturbing way meant to be together.
There are certain moments in literature where the history making within the pages needs to be presented to the waiting world with the perfect platinum record, as we say in the music business, kind of title. And Gone Girl fit flawlessly. How early did this roll out of your mind and off the tongue as the perfect title to tie the whole book together with?
I will admit, I am not a good title person. So Sharp Objects came from I think an accountant in my agent's office who had read the book. And it was somewhere through my agency, because I had called it Wind Gap after the town, and Sharp Objects is so much better. So I was grateful for that. Dark Places, I wish we'd come up with a different title. We were literally trying to play with things all the way up until it was had to go get printed, and we tried. We had a whole group of people throwing out titles, and I wouldn't say that's one of those titles that just goes, bruh. But the book is delightful. So I wish I'd come up with. It's secretly my favorite book, and Libby's my favorite. I adore her. But Gone Girl came early on. I like the swiftness of the title. It was locked in very early on. It's the only one of the three that I came up with on my own.
Is there any chance for fans keeping their fingers crossed for a sequel that it might hit store shelves in the near future?
Yes. This next book I'm almost done with, and it doesn't have anything to do with Gone Girl. But I feel like I'm ready to revisit now. And it was funny because today is the 10-year anniversary of Gone Girl being published, and I was in the shower and I was going, wait, in Gone Girl chronology, how old will their baby be now? And I was like, well, they're a 5-year anniversary when it starts. I'm like, that kid's about to be 16. This is amazing. I want to see what this child looks like that's raised by Amy and Nick. Like, that feels chilling to me.
So to confirm, there is a sequel in the works.
Not in the works, but in my mind. In my mind, I would not mind revisiting it at this point. It feels like it's been long enough. And I really would love to see, after what they got themselves into, what that family looks like now. As he says, we are the definition of a nuclear family.
Now, when this book dropped, without sounding too cliche, it did so like a bomb upon the book business. It blew up conventions, and it ushered in a new era of female thriller authors that followed in the mold of what Entertainment Weekly was quick to recognize early on as an ingenious and viperish thriller that's going to make Gillian Flynn a star, a great breathless read. While Vanity Fair read something new in your writing they hadn't before, noting that Flynn's writing is lyrical but biting, her novel functioning as much as an incisive psychological and sociological study as a missing person mystery. Adapting her own novel, Flynn has handed Fincher a naughty, sophisticated script to work with, and together they make something that once dense and agile, a stylish thriller that bores deep. Taking fans back in time to the moment word first came that there was interest in the book being adapted, did you make a condition of sale that you were able to adapt the book into the screenplay? Why was it so important to keep the creative reins? And for your fans, what were some of the greatest challenges and joys of taking this baby of yours from book to script?
That was part of, that was built into my contract for selling it. That I would write the first draft. Like having watched movies my whole life, and I was the nerdy kid who, but then the days before internet would mail away my $5 to get a screenplay that I wanted to read. So it always felt very organic to me. I felt like I could do it. It didn't feel foreign to me at all because I was so familiar with the structure, and I'm a good critic. Which I think is important. I can be really harsh, which I had to be as you're making that very vast and dense sort of book into a film that works. It was important to me to have that first try, and because I thought I could do it, and I did. For instance, we had offers on Sharp Objects along the way, and they always felt like they were going to turn more into horror films than what I wanted, and so I always declined those. And this was, I want a chance to do this, and so I wrote the first draft, and then David Fincher, who I will forever adore. He's like my creative muse. Said, read the script and liked it, and we started working together. And it was really a dream. It was one of those things where I thought, I know I'm too lucky right now. I know he's protecting me from a lot because he's a 800-pound gorilla, but not until you're released in the wild do you entirely realize that.
Now, without naming anyone, you're not the first author to try to translate their book into a screenplay, and most times with pretty mixed results at best. Yours instead proved to be glowing from review 1 on, and Variety best captured this amazing creative evolution in action when they championed your impressive screenwriting debut with adaptations of 2 of her other novels in the works. Flynn has ruthlessly streamlined, but not materially altered her story, fully retaining its bifurcated, time-shuffling structure and elaborate, spoiler-susceptible twists. To preserve the purity of the experience, read no further. The sheer complexity of the narrative finds the ideal interpreter in Fincher, who boasts one of cinema's greatest forensic minds, and who dissects the marriage of Nick and Amy Dunn, Affleck and Pike, with the same clinical precision and eye for minutiae he wielded in his serial killer procedural Seven and Zodiac. Together, he and Flynn spin this study of a troubled relationship into an extreme portrait of matrimonial hell, as well as a stark metaphor for just how little we may know or trust our so-called better halves. As integral and involved as you were in the adaptation, did that include you getting to have a say in who played the lead character, say Ben Affleck as an example for Nick?
I feel like it's really important to keep your characters until something is cast. I feel like that's, to me, it's like I want it to be like the character in the book because obviously that worked. So let's just write it as the characters in the book. But we did have Ben Affleck in mind pretty early on, and we did have the really amazing luxury of having about 6 weeks of rehearsals with all the actors. Sometimes I did full table reads. Sometimes Ben and Rosamund together. And that was when I could start fine tuning. And, Ben is so funny. Like I felt Nick I was giving him a few more lines that were, that matched him. And so that was really a lucky thing. Before then, it had been me and my husband just reading lines. And it was like, I don't know if it's that this line doesn't work or that we're horrible actors. And so it was good. It was very good to finally see proper actors inhabit these characters. And it was like, okay, this piece does work. We can drop this moment because it feels like we've covered this tone over here, and that really helped me. It really helped me fine tune it a lot. I did a lot of work during that time period.
After fighting to keep a creative hand in things, it must have felt like a great payoff when the pop culture influence and filter of this book became so fully realized.
It turns out I guess I do. I used to like to think of myself as this easygoing type, like, oh, I'll let it be what it's gonna be, but I will never be able to do that. I just won't. And plus, I love TV and I love movies. You get the Greek chorus that you have to kind of block out of, it's not enough like Gone Girl. It's too much like Gone Girl. It's, and you just have to kind of like stop the voices.
I bet it was a proud moment too for your parents to see their daughter nominated for so many Best Screenplay nominations and on the red carpet at award shows like the Golden Globes and the Oscars. That's kind of a top of the world Ma and Dad once in a lifetime moment.
They were so proud, and Gone Girl was nominated for about every screenwriting award, and then the Oscars were announced, and the second I heard American Sniper, I was like, oh, this isn't going to go well for me. This is a different space. But my dad, I think this prop is actually behind me. My dad is so sweet. That he sent me this little memorial Oscar that I have on my shelf because he was like, to me that's what you've earned. He was radiantly proud, and it was very cool. It's nice to make your parents proud. I will say that my mom, after she read Sharp Objects, was like, I really liked it. ... Are you okay?
Turning the proverbial page back to childhood, how early do you remember becoming enchanted with storytelling and storytellers?
I mean, Wrinkle in Time, I remember just reading over and over again. Like that one really was the one where I would bring to the dinner table. I could not put down. There's another one called The View from the Cherry Tree that is very unsung classic. I highly recommend. And of course, I was into Lois Duncan. Like absolutely I thought she wrote scary stuff for kids in a way that was never you never felt talked down to. You felt really in the moment. And I remember I think it's called Summer of the Witch, that just scared the pants off me. So I was always really attracted. I went through the whole Agatha Christie catalog, being a completist from the very first one all the way through. I mean, I remember going to the library and picking up her last Poirot book, and being so excited. It was like seeing a rock star for me.
As a kid, when do you first remember writing your own original versions of those?
It began sort of like Katie knew the man with the slender knife was underneath her bed, and went from there. So I was writing very early in third grade. I remember my first short story that I was very proud of. It was about 2 pages, and it was my obsession with Little House on the Prairie. And so a little girl, and also the fact that we had a one-room hunting cabin that we spent a lot of summers in that had an outhouse. And I was always use what you know. And the little prairie girl runs to the outhouse in the middle of the night, is immediately surrounded by wolves. And she's a spunky little can-do girl, and she's trying to figure out what she can use to fight the wolves and get back home. And so she's finally ready, and she bursts out and is immediately completely devoured and ripped apart by the wolves. So early on, I was veering away from courageous heroines and happy endings.
Sounds like a sign of things to come. What did your teachers think when you started handing those in as class assignments?
I had a wonderful 6th grade teacher, Dr. Paul Jensen, who encouraged me to dress like a mouse while I gave my book report on Miss Bianca's salt mine, and thought it was the coolest thing ever. I had Dr. Kyle in the 3rd grade who did not report me to the authorities when I gave him a book about a girl in the outhouse getting ripped apart by wolves. He encouraged me. And in high school, I had a wonderful teacher, Mr. Craig Ewing, who really just really believed in me. I was a very shy kid. I was not the kid who was going to be very showy. I did not talk in class. I was incredibly shy. And I think it would have been very easy at that time for me to get looked over and kind of lost. And I remember he really plucked me out and, put me in AP and encouraged me. And, I love teachers, obviously. I'm the child of 2 teachers. And I really just think they can, I do look at those those moments as real lights of getting me on the way when I could have gotten, um, you know, kind of lost with if someone doesn't believe in you and make you feel kind of special.
Now, growing up with both your parents being college professors, one specializing in reading comprehension and the other in film, it seems natural you'd wind up with those as the two bookends of this extraordinary career. Do you remember being more enthralled by one medium than the other as a kid? For instance, I understand your father took you to see a lot of horror films growing up.
They were community college professors and very dedicated to that. And my mom taught reading and my dad taught film. And so I lived in a home that was where stories were really considered of value. They weren't considered frivolous. They were considered the way we can open up to each other and learn about each other and discuss things and ideas. And so, my dad and I about once a week, he'd take me to the movies, whatever he wanted to watch. So I watched like Elephant Man at age 7, which I do remember weeping and leaving the theater. And he was like, "This is David Lynch. I have to finish this, so I'll find you outside." So I still to this day have never seen the end of it. But it was really, I loved it. And afterwards, we would always talk about it, and he would never let me get off with I liked it or didn't like it. It was always like, well, what do you think? Why did you think this part? Or what did you think about this character? And so he really taught me early on to, critique things. And I think that certainly led to my career as being a critic at Entertainment Weekly before I was writing books.
When you were in high school and then at the University of Kansas studying for your BA in English, or then at Northwestern University studying at the legendary Medill School of Journalism, as we and many like to say, they're so often the unsung heroes of any author's early confidence building and encouragement in general. Were there any librarians or teachers or university professors that made a lasting impression on you?
John Zymek is my wonderful, I adore him, and it was the same thing. I felt like he really believed in me, and we still keep in touch. He's here in Chicago, and as you can tell, he makes my face light up. So just and it was at Medill really where I found my people. I think looking back, KU was a little too big for me. It's a giant school, and I really did a lot of floating around there, and wondering if I was the only weird person there at the cake stand. And it was a Medill, like all my closest friends to this day are my pals from Medill and my pals from Entertainment Weekly. And I was like, oh, writers. That's what I've been missing, is other people who write. Yes.
You landed some pretty high-profile writing gigs right out of the gate, including working for U.S. News and World Report and then Entertainment Weekly in its heyday as a TV critic. And as with so many of your peers who began their writing careers working in journalism, you learned so much about the business and the craft of writing. What did you pick up and draw from within those gigs that would then filter down into your novel writing to come?
It was so cool. I mean, I was really there in the heyday of magazines, and it, for someone from Kansas City, I spent a lot of time walking around going like, and there's Madison Square Garden, and people will be like, yeah, stop it. But it was a place that I think we're missing, that's really important, that took pop culture seriously and addressed it really intelligently. And I wish, it has closed now except for online. And had a tough time, but it feels like right now, where's a better time than to have people taking pop culture seriously and offering thoughts and dealing with it as intelligent and not something that should be a guilty pleasure or shrugged off, because it's not. We're surrounded by it. It's everywhere. And we certainly learned that during COVID, didn't we? And so I think it's sad I've lost that voice, but boy, while I was there, man, I got to go to New Zealand and meet Peter Jackson and, travel, they would send you out to LA and to, doing profiles. And then when I got to reviews, that gave me a little more headspace to, I wrote my first 2 books while I still had my day job at Entertainment Weekly. So I just wrote at nights and weekends.
You came right out writing on the cutting edge with sharp objects. With Stephen King endorsing a debut or Equipped, I found myself dreading the last 30 pages or so, but was helpless to stop turning them. Then after the lights were out, the story just stayed there in my head, coiled and hissing like a snake in a cave. An admirably nasty piece of work, elevated by sharp writing and sharper instincts. Your hometown paper, the Chicago Sun-Times, would observe of another key achievement within the story, that Flynn's empathetic understanding of her major characters leads to storytelling that is sure and true, and it marks her as a writer to watch. And when readers first met Camille Preaker, she played her role on the page so authentically that most assumed she had to be somewhat biographically based on an amalgam of fellow journalist reporters that you'd encountered in your early years writing for magazines and periodicals. Did the subject matter come out of similar commentating and reporting you did on pop culture during those years?
I was very interested in writing about female violence and what it looks like generationally and the different outlets it comes from, whether it becomes a sort of over mothering and to a harmful degree, whether it becomes self-harm, whether it becomes acting out. And that was right during when Girls Gone Wild was everywhere, and I thought, this is not feminism, my people, this is not feminism. Don't you're taking your shit up for someone else to make money. Don't it was very alarming to me, and that's where Emma came from, certainly the youngest sister, and Camille definitely was me and what I felt my generation was, which was a lot of turning sexism and rage about it on ourselves, so it came from that idea, and I just didn't feel like there was enough. I felt like there were you could name a zillion books with anti-heroes who have dad issues and generational violence, and I mean that's half of the literature practically, and I thought we are really missing this. And I remember so I finished writing it and got an agent, and we started shopping it around, and there were very few people interested. And what we heard from everyone was men don't read women, and women don't like to read about hero women that they can't root for and find aspirational and want to be like.
Boy, did you prove that crowd and convention wrong.
I thought, I don't think that's true. Where are we getting this idea from? So I did, I found a publisher, and it turned out like women do like that. Read about that.
The nominational spectrum across which this debut novel was received and celebrated alone reflects that, from being shortlisted for the Mystery Writers of America's Edgar for Best First Novel, to winning the New Blood Fiction Dagger from the Crime Writers Association, to winning both the New Blood Fiction Dagger and the Ian Fleming Steel Dagger from the Crime Writers Association. But the simple act of holding the book in your hand must have been a nice validation that you were on the right track in spite of the naysayers.
That part felt very good. But it was a middling seller despite the reviews and such. It sold well enough to get me the next book, but it didn't sell enough for instance for me to quit my day job. But that didn't matter to me, and this part is true. I wanted to write a book, and I tried writing a book multiple times, as most writers do, and not get very far. And so for me, just getting to the end and having it be a thing in the world, back when books were only on the shelves, things in the world, and to get to see it, I was like, I win. I am, and all I really, my only plan was really to stay at Entertainment Weekly, which I loved, and have my magazine job, and then have that ability to write at night on weekends. And I kind of thought that'd be my life. So, but yeah, it was definitely cool to get it published, and certainly in retrospect, as the books have come out with dark female narrators and violence and that part is definitely.
You next took your growing legions of fans biting nails into the opening pages of Dark Places, which envisions the nightmare that most families have had at least once of a satanic cult breaking into their safe house in a small town and ripping that perfect picture to shreds, which is precisely what happens to poor Libby Day. Way ahead of when Charlize Theron portrayed her on the silver screen, and even predating when the Today Show selected it as a top summer read, or it's spending 100 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. When did the idea first occur to you to alternate the story between 1985 and the present, creating what People magazine read as a tense momentum that works beautifully, cautioning that when the truth emerges, it's so macabre, not even twisted little Libby Day could see it coming. What were some of the twists and turns you took in first seeing how it would all weave together before readers did?
Which is very funny to me now, was I had Libby as the narrator, and Libby was this very spunky, can-do gal. She'd lost all her family, but she'd battled her demons, and she was working with a psychologist who was her child psychologist, and they had freaking 50 pages wasted on trying to figure this out. And I knew it was going to be Libby in current day starting to wonder if her brother was innocent, and then the brother and the mom on the day of, as we get closer and closer to these axe murders. And I remember my husband, I had given him about the first 100 pages. He's always my first reader. And he was like, man, I let the bin day stuff is like, that's so great. And like the mom, like Patty, like, oh, it's awesome. And then he was quiet for a second. He was like, so how do you feel about Libby? Do you like writing her? And I immediately just had this torrent as if she was a person in my life. I was like, God, I can't stand her. Like, she's such a, like, what, screed about, like, how much, and, I was like, I hate writing her. And he just, like, I remember he, like, pulled up a bottle of wine and was like, and he was just like, yeah, you can tell she doesn't work at all. So we drank the bottle of wine, and then I just erased all of Libby and started over again, with a more appropriate opening that ends up, draw a picture of my soul, and it would be a scribble with fangs, and that's when I knew I had her. And I've always been fascinated by the satanic panic of the 80s. I can't get enough of, again, I'm into groupthink, I'm into witch huntery and what can happen. And of course had watched is it Lost Innocence, the documentary about the West Memphis Three, Paradise Lost. Obviously that case was fascinating, and just the idea of, this actually can happen and did happen forever. So that was my satanic panic piece. And of course, growing up in Kansas City, at the time period, I knew all about the farming crisis and what was happening to communities. So that's how it all blended together. And I hung out with a farmer, hung out with an actual farmer to get information to make the farming feel real. And I remember I finally asked him, how hard would it be to chop down a bull with an axe and like sort of a ritualistic, and he just, I think that's when I lost it. It was like, I don't want to be any part of whatever this is.
You'd win your first Edgar Award for short story for What Do You Do, eventually republished as The Grown Up. What was most thrilling about working in this medium? And do you agree, as most of your peers do, that it's a great practice for authors, especially those on the rise, apart from full-length novel writing, both in keeping your craft sharp and also keeping their name before readers? Or in your case, of course, being the inspiration for yet another magical Hollywood adaptation?
The genesis, actually, of The Grown Up is George R.R. Martin asked me to write him a short story because he was putting together a compendium, and the title of the theme of it was called Rogues. And so I was like, well, I can definitely do that, but I had to write it in a weekend. So I wrote The Grown Up in this like fever dream, and I loved the idea that it's told from the point of view of a woman who's tired of giving hand jobs because she has carpal tunnel syndrome. That's what's, because I'm always fascinated walking past, like, how many fortune teller stores can one city possibly have? I'm always just fascinated. Like, why are I never see anyone actually in there. What's the story behind the story? So that was a blast to do. And I have done like a screenplay for The Grown Up that has a little more of an ending to it. With Gone Girl, I liked the open ending. With The Grown Up, I actually had more plans for her should I ever have time for like a an additional 2 or 3 books because she was about to go on some serious adventuring.
The experience of adapting Gone Girl seems like it opens a new door, an era of creative evolution in your writing career. As though you go on to write more bestsellers, you eventually transition for a while full-time into TV medium with The Sharp Object with Marty Noxon, starring unforgettably Amy Adams. And again, you so naturally moved into creating within the world of television over a longer length of story, one where the legendary Hollywood Reporter appropriately shined their bright lights on the fact that on TV, sharp objects can't precisely capture Flynn's prose and the internalized descent into disorientation taken page by page. But series director Jean-Marc Vallée finds his own visual language that, driven by a ferociously wounded performance by Amy Adams, makes this 8-hour limited series haunting and riveting, both prestige and pulp. Please take your fans behind the scenes, onto the set, and inside how this next chapter in your bold book-to-screen journey within the smash HBO hit series first unfolded.
That was the timing of suddenly TV opening up and doing those limited series. Really before that, there just was it wasn't happening very much. It was not a thing in TV to do. So, being able to do that, I felt would enable us to understand Camille Preaker better, and having the incredibly good fortune of having Amy be her, because she's a tough character. I mean, she does not have her psyche together at all, and she proceeds to fall apart during the course. And I felt like to make it work and to really understand her, it was really important to be able to see her childhood, to see kind of those wonderful background clips and flashbacks, and give Emma that room so that you saw the relationship between these 3 people, and it kept it from being like a scary people type movie.
Now, the LA Times would next get in on the action of covering your ever-expanding career into book and film when they broke the news in 2018 that Hollywood's hottest Oscar-winning director, Steve McQueen, knew Widows would be his next film nearly a decade ago, 3 years before his third feature, 12 Years a Slave, nabbed the Best Picture Oscar in 2014. But the idea has been with the now 49-year-old even longer than that, based on the 1983 ITV series of the same name that followed a group of women, an ensemble led by Oscar winner Viola Davis, and including Elizabeth Debicki, Michelle Rodriguez, and Cynthia Erivo, who take on the final robbery job that their husbands died trying to complete. But the logline is basically the only thing McQueen's critically acclaimed film, which had its world premiere at September's Toronto International Film Festival, had in common with the original show. For one, it was important to the director to place that narrative into our reality today, he said. To that end, he chose Gone Girl scribe Gillian Flynn to help him make the intellectual heist thriller come to life. Indeed, once the adaptation setting was in place, the true heart of the story would, as Queen and Flynn embarked on fleshing out the key female characters. As an artist, when you're working with such amazing collaborators like McQueen and Viola Davis, it must have been exhilarating you could fuse so many electric ideas into one current as you were all creating together.
That was Steve McQueen. I mean, man, I love anyone who creates this Oscar-winning, amazing 12 Years a Slave, and then says, let's make a heist movie. I mean, that's so cool to me. It's so like, I love making movies, and I'm not going to be listening to the Greek chorus about what I should be doing next. Like, I want to do this. So he had grown up watching that. It was a big hit series, a TV, I think it was 4 episodes in the UK when he was a kid. And he wanted to do it here, and we were going to set it in Chicago, which was amazing. And I loved kind of, that one was almost the reverse. So Sharp Objects had to be broken into 8 episodes. And then with Widows, it was taking 4 episodes of TV and making it one movie. And creating new characters, both he and I we didn't want to make it just, oh, look, it's not the 80s anymore. It's now, and it's in Chicago, and do the same thing. So I really broke it down and used the Chicago model quite a bit, which, as you know, Chicago's corrupt, has a history of its own issues. So it's fun to play with that storyline.
It's almost comical in that light, isn't it, to consider how corrupt historically Illinois and Chicago politics are in that tradition. From the days when Al Capone and the outfit ran City Hall to the 3 governors in a row, Rod Blagojevich being most high profile, that have headed the can in a row during the millennium alone. I bet that had to be irresistible source material to draw from as a native of the Windy City.
How many other states have like governors who have gone to prison or consistently involved in shady deals? It is just it is sometimes the way businesses run here. So it was fun to be able to dig into it. I remember one reviewer was like, I mean, they act like it's the wild, they didn't like it. It felt like it was too Wild West and crazy with the politicians. And I was like, we were actually reining ourselves in on what it's like here sometimes.
As you continue to see your career launch into these new creative orbits, you eventually blasted off into that of the science fiction genre with Utopia. Where you'd already demonstrated such command of constructing a successful TV show, you were promoted to the impressive position of showrunner, along with co-writing this project starring John Cusack, Rainn Wilson, and Farrah McKenzie for Amazon Studios. And it was another runway for critics to line up on as your next success took off to rave about the results, with The Atlantic declaring that with their new series, Flynn wants to help pop culture catch up to reality, and TV Guide reminding viewers that it's rare to have a plot like this that stays interesting and gets deeper. A lot of thrillers like Utopia have trouble sustaining themselves past the initial premise for the first couple episodes, but Utopia remains compelling. The reason it works so well is it isn't overly complicated. You'll never forget who anyone is, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. Utopia is viciously funny, satirizing everything from message board detectives who look at every piece of entertainment they consume as a puzzle to be solved, to celebrity culture to corporate hubris. Please give those of us who don't know a sense of how writing and running a TV show works week in and out.
That was a project that I actually started with Fincher. While I started writing it, I was going to write every episode. He was going to direct every episode. And I started writing it while he was still wrapping up Gone Girl. And that was going to be the next project. And we got very far along with HBO. I mean, fully cast and very close to going. And it hurts my heart. And it got budget issues shut down. And, but I had the finished scripts. And so, Fincher was like, go for it. Like, make it happen. And so I ended up over at Amazon. And it was fascinating running the show. I mean, so I wrote every episode. I was there every day on set. I was, picking what sets look like, and I got so into props. I feel like in my former life I was a prop master. I was like, I remember there was one issue like Jessica Hyde, our anti-hero, is crushing a cell phone with an ashtray. And it became the joke because my prop guy ended up bringing me about 30 ashtrays because I kept going, that's not quite, I don't think that fits this house. I don't know. I think it was like Gillian just is an ashtray. I got so into that stuff, and, working with actors and, being able to see how it all comes together in a way I never really had before. I mean, I was on set tons with Gone Girl, but I was also pregnant with our second child, and then ended up kind of being grounded a little bit toward the end. It was the first time I'd really been able to see and be in charge of from beginning to end what something was. And then it was so it was a story about a mysterious pandemic that is taking over the world, and it ended up being released right like in October at the height of pandemic weariness. Like, just people were so sick of the whole thing, and so it had steady numbers, but it wasn't we didn't get a second season, let's put it that way. But we had the whole second season figured out, and it involved a fist fight between Rainn Wilson and John Cusack that I just still to this day regret not being able to film.
What's coming up next for you within the TV and film world, and any books on the creative horizon fans can look forward to?
I love the book I'm working on, which is another dark psychological thriller that's kind of about mind think gone awry, group think gone awry, given this environment right now. I think I can say this. I bought back the rights to Dark Places, and I just love that book. So I own that. I just wanted to own that, and again, I guess it's the control issue, but and I'm almost done with the first draft of my next novel, and that's mostly what I'm concentrating on. I owe my publisher a novel at this point. They've been very patient with me while I do the script writing thing, but and I feel like it's time. It's been nice to just I love the collaboration of movies and TV and the bigness of everything, but the natural introvert in me has enjoyed kind of getting back to my office and just being in charge of my own world and not having to think about budgets and locations and everything is like there's a certain freedom there that I've been enjoying. So that's going to take me a little bit of time, and then I if I had my druthers, I would always go back and forth, because I love that. Like I said, I love that collaboration of screenwriting and creating something. But I also, it's really nice to own your own universe.
Are you a little superstitious, like a lot of your peers we speak to, about giving fans too much of a look at what you're working on now, as the process can change so much from page one to the end?
I'm superstitious because my stuff does change from the first draft on. So it's definitely kind of a cult-like thing, a situation, and kind of where we are now, where we're all looking for. Seems like we're all looking for desperately for leaders and spiritual leaders and people to latch onto, and just this, and exploring where that seems like a very common yearning, like a deep yearning, is coming from, and how that can, go wrong. My stuff, everyone goes wrong.
You really, throughout your books, open readers and writers to the idea of not just looking under the rock, but digging down as deep as necessary to get to the heart of why human behavior is rationally or irrationally motivated. For instance, in Gone Girl, when Amy's preparing in the book to ultimately drown herself in the Gulf of Mexico after Nick's convicted of her murder. Why do you find that's necessary, book in and out, to tell the story to the fullest?
The truth is, I don't feel like it's necessary. It's just how I write. I would not be good at writing, a bubbly story about shopping or something. I have trouble even writing, like writing Amy, right? Writing the Amy Diaries, where those were my hardest pieces. Writing someone who is likable and doing the right thing, and is a normal person. That was the hardest thing I've ever written. So, as whatever, I guess I think some people have almost a cleansing ritual of getting that stuff out. And I do think there is something helpful about it. It's almost like therapy. It's just like doing the thing that I kind of think I might do if circumstances had been different. I remember, when I started writing, people were always like, it's actually the horror and the thriller and the psychological writers who are usually the nicest people, because they're getting all their demons out.
Time magazine recently referred to you in that rare class and club of internationally acclaimed authors that the New York Times has highlighted, ascended to such heights in your case by building an enormous following. And that's included not only a generation of readers, but writers too, who you effectively introduced to a new style of writing, many of whom are now best-selling and credit you as an influence. Is that a credit that you become comfortable with accepting as the years have gone by, and yours has really become a subgenre of writing all its own?
I'm able to be proud about that. Yeah, I am proud. I mean, anything that opens the doors for writers in a climate where it's getting harder and harder to be published. I mean, I don't know if I'd been trying to get Sharp Objects published today, if that would be a thing, because publishers are looking for people with platforms, or more of a sure thing, or something that's easy to slot in a very specific box. And so anytime I hear that, that Gone Girl's success made people want more, or open to more similar books. I just would like people to stop calling them domestic thrillers, because I think that's wildly sexist and a horrific thing to call it. I think it degrades the genre in a very deliberate way.
Before we go, what within that writing audience do you point to as a few of the freedoms they should feel as they're working within this domestic thriller genre, or any for that matter, to keep them excited and on the edge of their own seat while they're creating?
First and foremost, you need to know what you're saying. To me, the best psychological thrillers, like I said, are stories, that have themes to them that you're trying to talk about. I would like Dennis Lehane, I think, is, he opened me up when I read Mystic River, and that was when I first thought, oh my gosh, like I can talk about so many things that I want to talk about and use this thriller as this engine. I mean, I remember reading that through the night and going like, this is how I need to do what I need to do. You have to have an interesting protagonist that you really like. And I don't mean that as likable, but I mean that you are deeply fond of. I mean, I love Amy with all her faults. I love exploring her. I love writing her. If you're not feeling like that you are loving writing this character, that this character isn't taking over, so that we're, when you're at the grocery store, you go like, oh, amazing Amy would hate that that person has 10 items. It says 8 items right there. I mean, that like that's when you've got something, and you have to be true to that. You cannot write something just because, that'd be my third one, just because you think it'll sell. That's, to me, that's the most dangerous thing, most likely way to lead you to a really bland and unoriginal story. I think the main thing I say to anyone who's trying to write a book is, first of all, you have to write a book. Like, you have to sit down and write. A writer writes, and you're gonna probably write in the wrong direction, and you're gonna have an awful first draft, but you're gonna have a first draft, and you're gonna see where the problems are. And if it feels like a slog, it's because it is a slog. It is work. There's no such thing as a muse coming down, but there is a true privilege to making your living as a writer. I truly feel really privileged every day, and I think it makes me a more aware and observant human in general. Because I'm always looking for things to write about. I always have, wherever I am is a possible set for something, a possible scene. And stop looking at your phones. Look around at the world. That's where you get inspiration from real people in real life.
Finally, it struck me the Washington Post once wrote that for Gillian Flynn, a novel often arrives in a single mental image, which is fascinating. Do you tend to write visually where you can see everything happening on the page? In your head in full color, as book in and out, it feels very cinematic to read.
I see them like a movie. I really do. I can see everything and smell everything, and I'm looking around the room, and I'm looking at what this character is doing. I mean, it's those little hints, it's those little tiny touches and observations that to me make a scene. Like Desi's mom smelling slightly vaginal. I mean, it's those little things.
Gillian Flynn, we consider you one of the brightest and most brilliant minds creating today in books or film. Thank you so much for taking out time from your very busy schedule to be here on About the Authors TV.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Take care.